This week we're yet again blessed with a WonderSwan game that's played in portrait orientation. This time we'll be taking a look at Puzzle Bobble, a port of the Super Famicom port of the arcade hit of the same name. It was released on July 1st, 1999, developed by Yoshidayama Workshop, and published by Sunsoft. Yoshidayama Workshop is definitely not a developer most will be familiar with, as they mostly did subcontract development work for larger developers and don't usually have their names listed anywhere aside from a game's end credits. The company was founded in Kyoto in December of 1995 by Koichi Murata, the director of this Puzzle Bobble port, and Kenji Okuda, who's listed as assistant director. Funnily enough, they were also responsible for the arcade version of WonderSwan launch title Gunpei, and also did some subcontracting on the PlayStation version of Gunpei. Almost half of the projects they worked on were for the WonderSwan or WonderSwan Color, though they were only responsible for the sound for most of these projects. The company fizzled sometime after the release of the last game they worked on, Tales of the World Summoner's Lineage for the Game Boy Advance, released in 2003. Murata, at the very least, is still involved in the gaming industry. His new company Bitgroove develops smartphone games and edutainment apps, including 2 Kingdom Hearts mobile games, Final Fantasy All the Bravest, and my personal favorite, Taiko no Tatsujin Plus. Puzzle Bobble is a 1994 arcade puzzle game developed and published by Taito, also known as Bust-A-Move in the West. The game's main characters, Bub and Bob, come from another Taito series, the 1986 arcade action platformer Bubble Bobble. In Bubble Bobble, Bub and Bob wander around the map shooting bubbles from their mouths at enemies trapping them inside. The bubble continues to float around the map for some time, and you must run into the bubble to kill the enemy for good. Repeat this for all of the enemies in the stage and you'll move on to the next one. Puzzle Bobble effectively takes this premise and turns it into a puzzle game. In Puzzle Bobble, instead of having bubbles coming straight from the characters' mouths, the playfield starts with bubbles laid out in a predefined pattern, and both players are in charge of a launch device called a pointer at the bottom of the screen. When fired, bubbles can travel in a straight line and bounce off of walls. The angle of the shot can be adjusted by turning the pointer left or right. If a fired bubble touches a group of 2 or more bubbles of the same color, then that group of bubbles and any bubbles hanging from them get cleared. Every so often, the ceiling of the play area will be lowered, and if any bubbles reach the bottom of the screen, it's game over. Your goal is to clear all of the bubbles from the playfield, letting you move on to the next stage. So let's say you beat all 32 stages. What now? Much like other arcade games, the lasting power of the game lies in its scoring system. I mentioned earlier that bubbles hanging from the group of bubbles that are popped also get cleared, and the scoring system incentivizes you to clear as many bubbles that way as possible. Whereas popped bubbles are worth 10 points each, hanging bubbles' score value is calculated by starting with a base value of 20 points for the first bubble, and every other hanging bubble causes a score to be doubled. So 1 hanging bubble is 20 points, 2 is 40, 3 is 80, and so on. There is also a bonus, which is awarded if you manage to clear the stage in less than minutes, with the highest value being 50,000 points for completing it in under 5 seconds. You can also play Puzzle Bobble in multiplayer via the WonderSwan communication cable. Similar to the garbage block mechanic from Puyo Puyo 2, clearing a group of 4 or more bubbles will cause a portion of that group's bubbles to be sent to your opponent's playfield, further delaying them in clearing the board. Continuing the parallels with Puyo Puyo 2, the original version of Puzzle Bobble is a very bright and colorful game, and that got lost in the conversion to the WonderSwan. Unlike that game, where individual Puyo were so small that it became hard to give them distinctive patterns, Puzzle Bobble bubbles are so much larger and easier to tell apart from each other. The unfortunate side effect from this is that the playfield is much noisier visually than it is in color, and it takes more time to parse the patterns than it is to identify by color. Puzzle Bobble is an iconic arcade puzzle game, and it absolutely should be a game you own some version of. For a game as colorful as Puzzle Bobble, it just doesn't feel right to be playing it in shades of gray. In terms of home or arcade versions, it's pretty universally agreed upon that Puzzle Bobble 2 or 2X is the peak of the series. However, when it comes to handhelds, things get a little bit more complicated. All of the handheld versions feel compromised in one way or another. The one that feels most authentic to me is the Game Gear version, because it captures the aesthetic of the original game better than any other version does. If you don't mind deviating from the original aesthetic, then Bust-A-Move Deluxe on the PSP is also a solid option. The WonderSwan version is absolutely fine if you don't mind playing it in grayscale, but as far as I'm concerned, you should mind.